The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, people looked up at the night sky and dreamed of what lay beyond. They built telescopes and rockets. They sent probes to distant planets. They believed that when they finally met other intelligent life, it would be a moment of wonder and discovery. They were wrong. The Dominion arrived on a cold morning in March 2317. 200 warships blocked out the sun over every major city on Earth. Their vessels were massive, each one the size of a small mountain. They hung in the sky like dark clouds promising a terrible storm. Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest, and looked down at the blue planet below. His gray skin reflected the glow of holographic displays around him. His 4 eyes blinked slowly as he studied the primitive world. "Another conquest," he said to his second-in-command. "These humans have only just begun to explore their own solar system. They have no shields, no plasma weapons. Their fastest ships would take years to reach the nearest star." His second-in-command, a younger named, nodded eagerly. "They will fall quickly, Admiral, like all the others." Allowed himself a thin smile. In his 300 years of service to the Dominion, he had conquered 47 worlds. Some had fought hard, some had surrendered immediately, but all of them had fallen in the end. The Dominion always won. "Send the message," ordered. "Give them 1 day to surrender. If they refuse, we will demonstrate our power." The message went out to every screen, every radio, every device on Earth. The face appeared everywhere, speaking in a language that translation programs converted into every human tongue. "People of Earth, you are now subjects of the Dominion. Surrender your governments, surrender your weapons, surrender your will. You have 1 day to comply. Resistance will be punished with extinction." The world erupted in chaos. Governments held emergency meetings. Militaries prepared their weapons. People ran through the streets in panic. Some prayed, some cried, some stood on rooftops and shouted defiance at the alien ships above. Earth's leaders made their choice. They launched everything they had. Nuclear missiles rose from silos across the planet. Fighter jets scrambled into the sky. Warships fired their guns at the alien vessels. For one brief, proud moment, humanity showed its teeth. They barely noticed. Their shields absorbed the nuclear blasts like raindrops on glass. Their weapons turned fighter jets into falling ash. In 12 minutes, every military base on Earth was burning. Watched the pitiful resistance crumble and felt nothing but boredom. "As expected," he said, "they are children throwing stones at giants." 6 months later, Earth officially surrendered. The governments of the world signed the Treaty of Submission on the deck of the Eternal Conquest, stood above them like a god accepting worship from insects. Humanity was conquered, or so the Dominion believed. 30 years passed. Admiral still ruled Earth from his orbital station, Dominion's pride. He had grown comfortable in his position. The humans had proven to be excellent subjects, obedient and completely broken in spirit. Every month cargo ships rose from Earth's surface carrying tribute: minerals, rare metals, food, technology components. The humans mined and farmed and manufactured, and they did it all without complaint. Reports to the Dominion High Council were always the same: Earth was, humanity was tamed. On this particular morning, was reviewing production reports in his private chambers when his door chimed. "Enter," he called without looking up. A young diplomat walked in. Her name was, and she had been assigned to Earth only 2 years ago. She was barely 90 years old, practically a child by standards. Her gray skin was smoother than his, her 4 eyes brighter and more curious. "Admiral," she said, bowing respectfully, "I wish to discuss something that concerns me." Finally looked up from his reports. He did not like being interrupted, but came from an important family. Her father sat on the High Council itself. He could not simply dismiss her. "Speak," he said. Stepped forward and placed a data tablet on his desk. I have been studying the population records of Earth. Something does not add up. Glanced at the tablet without touching it. Explain. When we conquered Earth, the human population was approximately 8 billion. After the initial resistance and the establishment of control, the population was recorded at 7.2 billion. Deaths from the war, suicides, reduced birth rates, all expected. Yes, said impatiently. What is your point? Took a breath. Over the past 30 years, the population should have recovered. Humans breed quickly, but our current records show only 6.8 billion humans on Earth. That is 400 million fewer than we should have. Stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was a cold, dismissive sound. You are worried about missing humans. Perhaps they died in mining accidents. Perhaps they fled to remote areas where our sensors do not reach. Perhaps our census is simply inaccurate. These are primitive people. They are not worth counting precisely. But Admiral, enough, returned to his reports. You are young. You see shadows where there is only darkness. Humanity is broken. I have watched them for 30 years. They do not have the will or the capability to threaten us. Now leave me. I have work to do. Wanted to argue. She wanted to show him the other irregularities she had found. The strange energy readings from deep in the oceans. The unusual patterns in human communication networks. The workers who seemed to disappear for months before reappearing at different facilities. But she knew it was useless. Admiral had made up his mind long ago about humanity. He saw them as cattle, nothing more. Yes, Admiral, she said quietly. She picked up her data tablet and left his chambers. As she walked through the corridors of Dominion's pride, could not shake the feeling that something was very wrong on Earth. She had spent 2 years studying humans, learning their languages, reading their history. They were not the simple, broken creatures that described. They had survived ice ages and plagues. They had fought world wars against each other and rebuilt from the ashes. They had split the atom and walked on their moon. They were survivors. Could such a species truly be conquered in 6 months? Decided she would continue her investigation, even if no one would listen. She would find the truth. 7 miles beneath the Pacific Ocean, far below where any sensor could reach, Director stood in the central command chamber of Citadel Zero. She was 62 years old, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much. She had been a colonel in the United States Air Force when they came. She had watched her squadron get vaporized in the first attack. She had attended the surrender ceremony, standing in the back row with her fists clenched so tight that her nails drew blood. And then, like millions of others, she had begun the real fight. The chamber around her hummed with activity. Hundreds of technicians worked at holographic displays, monitoring systems that officially did not exist. The walls were lined with screens showing camera feeds from across Earth, mines, factories, farms, all the places where humanity pretended to be slaves while secretly building an army. Director, a young man called from his station. The Prometheus array reports all green, 3,000 ships ready for deployment. Nodded slowly. 3,000 ships. It had taken 30 years to build them. 30 years of secret mining operations, hidden manufacturing plants, stolen technology, and millions of people living double lives. Every mining facility on Earth had a secondary purpose. Every cargo ship that carried tribute to the had also carried stolen components back down. Every factory worker was also a soldier training for the day that was finally approaching. They had given humanity the perfect cover. They wanted resources. Humanity built massive industrial operations to provide them, and built warships in the shadows beneath. They wanted obedience. Humanity bowed and scraped and said, "Yes, Master," while teaching their children the truth in hidden schools. It was the greatest deception in human history, and had spent 30 years making sure it succeeded. "Show me the fleet," she said. The main screen flickered, and then was looking at something that made her heart swell with fierce pride. The Prometheus array stretched across a pocket of extra-dimensional space, accessed through the Shadow Gate. 3,000 warships floated in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with hybrid technology. They were not as large as vessels, but they were faster, more maneuverable, and armed with weapons that combined human innovation with reverse-engineered alien technology. The crews of those ships had been training for decades. Many of them had been born in the hidden cities beneath Earth's surface. They had never seen the sun except in videos. Their entire lives had been dedicated to this moment. The Shadow Gate said, "Status report." Another technician responded, "Shadow Gate is fully operational, Director. We can open 12 simultaneous exit points anywhere within 50 light-years of Earth. All target coordinates are locked." Closed her eyes for a moment. 50 light-years. They had believed humans could not even travel to the nearest star. They had no idea that humanity had not just matched their technology. In some ways, they had exceeded it. The Shadow Gate was the crown jewel of human achievement. It had started as a captured jump drive, salvaged from a ship that had crashed during the initial invasion. The Dominion had written off the crash as a malfunction. They never imagined that humans had secretly recovered the wreckage and spent 3 decades studying it. The original drive could move a single ship across light years instantly. Humanity had improved it. The Shadow Gate could open multiple wormholes simultaneously, connecting to a hidden pocket dimension where the fleet waited. It could deploy thousands of ships across multiple locations in the same moment. When the time came, they would not face a slow, predictable enemy. They would face an army appearing from nowhere, striking everywhere at once. "Director," a new voice spoke, turned to see General Cole approaching. He was a tall man with dark skin and a soldier's bearing. He had been one of the first recruits to the Resistance, a young lieutenant who had refused to accept defeat. Said, "I assume you have news." "The Harvest Fleet is arriving early," said, his expression grim. 500 warships. They will be in Earth orbit within 4 days. His jaw tightened. The Harvest Fleet came every 3 years to collect Earth's tribute. It was always a show of force, a reminder of who was in charge, but it was not supposed to arrive for another 6 months. "Why early?" she asked. "Unknown. Our sources say that Supreme Commander is in charge. He wants to make an impression on the High Council. Perhaps he thinks increasing pressure on Earth will produce more resources." Stared at the screen showing her hidden fleet. They had planned to launch the operation in 8 months. Everything was ready, but they had wanted more time, more training, more preparation, more certainty. Now that time was gone. "If the Harvest Fleet stays in orbit for a standard inspection," she said slowly, "they might detect our deeper facilities. Their sensors are not good enough to find us normally, but if they start looking carefully, they could find everything finished. 30 years of work exposed, 3,000 ships destroyed before they ever fire a shot." The command chamber had gone silent. Every technician was listening, their faces pale with fear and hope. Looked at the people around her. She thought about the millions more across Earth who had sacrificed everything for this moment. She thought about her own children, born in secret facilities, raised with the knowledge that they might die for a freedom they had never known. Then she thought about Admiral sitting in his orbital station, comfortable in his certainty that humanity was broken, about the generations of humans who would grow up in chains if she did nothing. Made her decision. "Contact all resistance cells," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Send the signal to the fleet, move up the timeline." Stepped closer, "Are you sure?" She looked at him with eyes that had carried this burden for 3 decades. "We have waited 30 years, we have bowed, we have scraped. We have let them believe we were nothing, but we are not nothing. We are humanity, and we do not kneel." She turned to the communications officer. "Send the message, 2 words, everyone will know what it means." The officer's fingers trembled as he typed. Then, across Earth and through the shadow gate to the waiting fleet, the signal went out. 2 words that would change the galaxy forever. Prometheus Rising was in her quarters when she felt the station shudder. She looked up from her data tablet, confused. Dominion's pride was a massive structure. It should not shudder for anything less than an attack. But that was impossible. Who would attack a station in Earth orbit? She walked to her window and looked down at the blue planet below. For a moment, everything seemed normal. The familiar continents, the white swirls of clouds, the dark patches of ocean. Then she saw something that made her blood freeze. The ocean was glowing. Not in one place, but in 12 different locations scattered across the planet. Brilliant blue-white light was pouring up from beneath the waves, beams of energy so bright that she could see them from orbit. Alarms began to sound throughout the station. Ran from her quarters toward the command deck. When she arrived, she found chaos. Officers were shouting at each other. Holographic displays were flashing red warnings. And at the center of it all stood Admiral, his 4 eyes fixed on the main viewport with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Fear. Admiral, she said, pushing through the crowd. What is happening? Did not answer. He simply pointed at the viewport. Turned to look. The glowing spots in the ocean were expanding, widening into massive circles of light. Then, one by one, they tore open. She had seen wormholes before. Every knew what they looked like, swirling tunnels of light that allowed instant travel between stars. But she had never seen anything like this. 12 wormholes opened simultaneously, not in space, where they belonged, but rising from Earth's oceans like the mouths of hungry gods. The energy readings were off every scale the station could measure. And from those wormholes came ships. Not dozens, not hundreds. Thousands. Human ships poured from the shadow gates in formations that should have been impossible. They were sleek and fast, bristling with weapons that glowed with stolen technology. They rose from the oceans and filled the sky, spreading out across Earth orbit in a wave of steel and fire. The station's sensors screamed numbers at 3,000 ships, 3,000 enemy vessels appearing from nowhere in a single moment. Admiral finally found his voice. It was barely a whisper. Impossible, this is impossible. Thought of her investigation, the missing population, the strange energy readings, the patterns she had noticed but could not explain. Now she understood. The humans had never been conquered. They had never stopped fighting. They had simply been waiting, building, preparing. For 30 years, they had fooled the entire Dominion. Admiral and officer shouted, "The human ships are taking attack positions. They are targeting our orbital defenses." Seemed unable to move. His certainty, his arrogance, his absolute belief in superiority, all of it crumbled as he watched the human fleet deploy. It was who acted. She grabbed the communications console and opened a channel to the Dominion High Council. "Emergency transmission," she said, her voice shaking. "Invasion in progress. Earth was never conquered. Repeat, Earth was never conquered. They have a fleet. They have been hiding a fleet. They." The transmission cut off as the first human missiles struck the station's communication arrays. And in the central command chamber of Citadel Zero, Director watched her ships rise to meet their enemy. 30 years of patience, 30 years of sacrifice, 30 years of silent, burning rage. The Shadow Gate had awakened. Now humanity would show the galaxy what they truly were. The first hour of the battle was chaos. Human ships swarmed across Earth orbit like angry wasps defending their hive. They attacked in patterns that tactical computers could not predict, striking from unexpected angles and retreating before the larger alien vessels could bring their main weapons to bear. Admiral stood frozen on the command deck of Dominion's Pride as his world collapsed around him. Alarms screamed. Officers shouted. Damage reports flooded in from every section of the station. Admiral, his second-in-command, grabbed his arm. "Admiral, we need orders." Blinked his 4 eyes slowly. For 300 years he had been a conqueror. He had crushed rebellions. He had destroyed enemy fleets. He had never, not once, been surprised like this. "How?" he whispered. "How did they build this? How did we not see?" "Admiral, please. The station shields are failing." Finally, something clicked in his mind. He was a soldier. He had trained for centuries. He could not change what had happened, but he could fight. "All ships, defensive formation," he commanded, his voice steadier now. "Protect the station. Send a priority message to the Harvest Fleet. Tell Supreme Commander to accelerate his arrival. We need reinforcements immediately." Across the command deck, watched the battle unfold on tactical displays. She had been right. Every suspicion, every strange reading, every missing piece of data, it all pointed to this. The humans had been planning their revenge for 30 years. Part of her felt a strange emotion that took her a moment to identify. It was admiration. These creatures that the Dominion had dismissed as primitive animals had pulled off the greatest military deception in galactic history. They had built an entire fleet under the noses of their conquerors. They had waited 3 decades for this moment. What kind of species could do that? What kind of patience did it require? A massive explosion shook the station, throwing to the floor. When she looked up, she saw that an entire section of the command deck had been torn away. Stars were visible through the gap, along with the bright trails of missiles and plasma bolts. "Hull breach," someone screamed. "Emergency bulkheads are not responding." Pulled herself to her feet and ran toward the breach. Other officers were trying to evacuate, pushing past her in their panic. But she had seen something, a wounded technician trapped under fallen debris near the gap. She reached the technician and began pulling at the metal, pinning him down. The air was already getting thin as it escaped into space. The emergency bulkheads should have sealed automatically, but the human attack had damaged too many systems. "Leave me," the technician gasped. "Save yourself." "Quiet," said. She was not strong enough to move the debris alone. She looked around desperately and saw a piece of broken pipe. She jammed it under the metal and used it as a lever, pushing with all her strength. The debris shifted just enough. She grabbed the technician's arm and dragged him away from the breach. Behind them, the emergency bulkhead finally slammed shut, cutting off the flow of escaping air. Collapsed against the wall, breathing hard, the technician looked up at her with grateful eyes. "Thank you," he said. "You could have run." Did not answer. She was watching the tactical display on a nearby wall, where human ships continued their relentless assault. In the void between Mars and Jupiter, the Harvest Fleet received Admiral's distress call. Supreme Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, Dominion's Wrath, and listened to the message with growing anger. His 4 eyes narrowed as he heard words that made no sense. "Human fleet, surprise attack, thousands of ships, request immediate assistance." "Play it again," he ordered. His communications officer obeyed. The message repeated, his voice tight with fear. Had served in the Dominion military for 400 years. He had conquered more worlds than he could count. He had earned his position through victory after victory, and he had never, not once, heard of a conquered species mounting this kind of attack. 3,000 human ships, he said slowly. "How is this possible?" His tactical officer, a careful named, pulled up data on his display. "Supreme Commander, there are no records of human shipbuilding capability anywhere near this level. Their industrial output has been monitored constantly. There is no way they could have built such a fleet." "And yet they have," said. "Clearly, our monitoring was insufficient." He walked to the main viewport and stared at the distant stars. Behind him, his crew waited nervously for orders. Was not afraid. He had 500 warships under his command, each one more powerful than anything the humans could build. Whatever tricks they had used to hide their fleet, they could not hide from firepower. More than that, he saw an opportunity. If he arrived at Earth and crushed this human rebellion, he would become a hero of the Dominion. The High Council would shower him with honors. He might even earn a seat among them. But if the humans won, if Earth actually fell, no, he would not allow it. All ships commanded, maximum speed to Earth, prepare for combat. Watched the battle from Citadel Zero's command center, with the calm focus of a chess master in the final moves of a game. The first phase was going exactly as planned. Her ships had caught the orbital defenses off guard, destroying dozens of weapon platforms and military stations before the enemy could organize. Dominion's pride was damaged but still fighting. That was fine. Station was not the primary target. Director, General Cole reported from his tactical station. The Harvest Fleet has altered course. They will arrive in Earth orbit in 18 hours. Nodded 500 ships. Yes, Supreme Commander is in command. Good, allowed herself a small smile. I was hoping he would come. Looked at her curiously. You wanted to face a larger force. I wanted to face an arrogant one. Pulled up's file on her display. 400 years of victory. He has never lost a battle. He has never faced a species that could truly challenge him. He will underestimate us just like did. She stood and walked to the main tactical display, where thousands of blue and red dots represented human and ships locked in combat. The old military wisdom says you should never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake, but there is a corollary that people forget. What is that? His eyes were cold. Sometimes the best strategy is to let your enemy think he is winning, right up until the moment you destroy him. She turned to her communications officer. Send word to the fleet. Begin Phase 2. Across Earth orbit, human ships that had been engaging the defenses suddenly changed their behavior. They stopped pressing their attacks. They began to pull back, retreating toward the planet. On Dominion's Pride, the tactical officers reported the change with confused relief. The humans are retreating, Admiral said. They are breaking off their assault. Admiral watched the displays with narrowed eyes. He had spent 300 years fighting wars. He knew what a retreat looked like. This was not a retreat. They are repositioning, he said slowly. They are not running, they are preparing for something. For what, Admiral? Did not answer immediately. He studied the human formations, trying to understand their strategy. The enemy ships were forming into defensive clusters around specific points in orbit. Then he understood, and his blood went cold. They are waiting for the Harvest Fleet, he said. They know is coming, they want him to come. Blinked in confusion. But that makes no sense. Has 500 ships. Adding them to our forces would give us overwhelming superiority. Would it? Pulled up the tactical data. Look at their formations. They are not defending against our current forces. They are preparing for a larger battle. They have set a trap and is walking right into it. He turned to his communications officer. Send a message to the Harvest Fleet. Tell not to engage. Tell him the humans have prepared something. Tell him to wait for more reinforcements. Yes, Admiral. But deep in his heart, knew that would not listen. The Supreme Commander was too proud, too confident in his own superiority. He would see the human fleet and think only of the glory he would gain by destroying it. That was exactly what the humans were counting on. In the hidden cities beneath Earth's surface, people gathered around screens to watch the battle unfolding in orbit. For 30 years, they had lived in secrecy. They had built ships and trained soldiers and kept the greatest secret in human history. Many of them had been born underground, never seeing the sun except in pictures. Now they watched their fleet engage the enemy, and they held their breath. In a small apartment in the city beneath the Andes Mountains, a woman named Maria held her daughter close. The girl was 12 years old, born in the underground, raised with stories of the world above and the invaders who had stolen it. "Mama," the girl asked, "are we going to win?" Maria watched the screen, where human ships danced around vessels like wolves circling a bear. She thought about her own mother, who had died in the initial invasion. She thought about the years of pretending to be a loyal slave while working in secret to build humanity's salvation. "Yes, baby," she said, "we are going to win." On the screen, a human destroyer named Defiance swooped past a cruiser and unloaded its missiles into the enemy's engines. The larger ship began to drift, disabled and helpless. The girl cheered. Around the city, thousands of others cheered with her. After 30 years of silence, humanity was finally fighting back. The Harvest Fleet arrived at Earth in perfect formation. 500 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in a single coordinated wave. They appeared on the far side of Earth from the main battle, exactly as their tactical computers had calculated. Supreme Commander stood on the bridge of Dominion's Wrath and surveyed the battlefield. His tactical displays showed the human fleet clustered in defensive positions, while Admiral damaged forces tried to regroup. 3,000 enemy ships, reported. Significant damage to orbital defenses. Dominion's pride has lost 40% of its weapon systems. Smiled, and how many human ships have been destroyed? Sensors indicate approximately 200 human ships destroyed or disabled. Only 200, frowned. Has grown weak in his comfortable position. He should have destroyed many more. Supreme Commander, said carefully, Admiral sent a message. He believes the human formation is a trap. He requests that we wait for additional reinforcements. Laughed. It was a cold, dismissive sound. A trap. Sees traps everywhere because he was caught off guard. He is embarrassed by his failure and wants to share the blame. He waved his hand at the tactical display. Look at their formation. They are huddled together like frightened animals. They know we are here. They know they cannot defeat us. This is not a trap, it is desperation. With respect, Supreme Commander, the humans have already proven capable of great deception. Perhaps we should. Enough, his voice was hard. I have conquered 100 worlds. I do not need advice from subordinates, and I do not need to fear primitives who build ships in caves. He straightened to his full height and addressed his entire bridge crew. Today we will crush this rebellion. Today we will show the galaxy what happens to those who challenge the Dominion. And when we are finished, I will personally drag the human leaders before the High Council in chains. He raised his hand. All ships attack. Watched the Harvest Fleet charge toward her defensive positions, and she felt something she had not allowed herself to feel in 30 years. Hope. He took the bait, said beside her, is coming straight at us. Of course he is. Studied the enemy formation. 500 ships, no subtlety, no caution. He thinks he is chasing frightened animals. He is about to learn otherwise. Nodded, she turned to her tactical officer. Status of the Shadow Gate. Fully operational, Director, ready to open on your command. And the reserve fleet. 1,000 ships standing by in pocket dimension. Crews are at battle stations. Looked at her sharply. 1,000, I thought we only had 3,000 total. Smiled, it was a thin, cold expression. We let the count 3,000 ships. We wanted them to think they knew our full strength. She pointed at the display, where his fleet was approaching her defensive positions. In about 10 minutes, we'll engage our main force. His 500 ships against our 3,000. He thinks those odds favor him because ships are larger and more powerful. He might be right, said. Our technology is good, but we have never tested it in a full-scale battle. That is why we have the reserve. Eyes were fixed on the approaching enemy. When is fully committed, when his ships are engaged and unable to retreat easily, we will open the Shadow Gate behind him. Understood immediately. 1,000 fresh ships appearing at his back. Exactly. He will be caught between two forces with nowhere to run. His fleet will be destroyed, and we will win control of Earth orbit. And then, thought about the other shadow gates, the ones positioned near military bases and supply lines. She thought about the messages already spreading to other conquered worlds, messages telling them that Earth had risen, that the Dominion was not invincible. And then, she said, we show the galaxy that humanity is just getting started. On Dominion's wrath, watched his fleet close with the human positions. His ships fired their main weapons, brilliant lances of plasma that reached across the void. Human ships exploded wherever the beams touched. Good, he said, they break easily enough. But even as he spoke, he noticed something strange. The human ships were not trying to retreat. They were not scattering in panic. Instead, they were holding their positions, absorbing his fire while returning it with their own weapons. Human missiles and plasma bolts struck his ships. Most were absorbed by shields, but some found weak points. A destroyer on his left flank exploded. Another reported critical damage. We are taking casualties, reported, his voice tense. 3 ships destroyed, 7 damaged. Acceptable losses, said, but he frowned as he studied the battle. The humans were fighting harder than he had expected. Their tactics were strange, unpredictable, ships making maneuvers that seemed suicidal but somehow worked. And their weapons were stronger than they should have been, much stronger. He said slowly, analyze the human weapons signatures. His tactical officer worked his console, then looked up with fear in his eyes. Supreme Commander, their plasma weapons are based on technology, but they have been modified, enhanced. They are operating at nearly twice the efficiency of our own systems. Felt the first cold touch of doubt. That is impossible. How could primitives improve on Dominion technology? Before could answer, the entire bridge shook with a massive impact. Alarms screamed. Officers shouted damage reports. Direct hit to our forward shields, someone yelled. They are using focused plasma bursts. Our shields are not designed to handle this type of attack. Gripped his command console as another impact shook the ship. Through the viewport, he could see human ships darting between his larger vessels, striking at weak points with precision that should have been impossible. They knew exactly where to hit. They knew exactly how to hurt ships. Because they had spent 30 years studying captured technology, learning it, improving it, and preparing to use it. Supreme Commander, his voice was sharp with alarm. Energy signatures behind us, massive energy signatures. Turned to look at the rear displays. What he saw made his blood freeze. The space behind his fleet was tearing open. Not one wormhole, but 4, spreading across his escape route in a curtain of blinding light. And from those wormholes came ships. 1,000 human vessels poured into normal space, fresh and ready for battle. They immediately opened fire on the rear of his formation, catching his ships between 2 forces. He was trapped. No, whispered, no, this cannot. On the command display, the human attack fell upon his fleet like wolves upon scattered sheep. And Supreme Commander, conqueror of 100 worlds, finally understood that he had walked into the most perfectly executed trap in galactic history. In Citadel Zero, watched the Battle of Earth reach its climax, and she allowed herself to believe that humanity might actually win. But she knew the war was only beginning. Send the signal to all Shadow Gate positions, she ordered. Tell them it is time. Across the galaxy, at a dozen hidden positions, human ships prepared to emerge. The Dominion had no idea what was coming. Earth's hidden fleet had awakened, and it was hungry for justice. The Battle of Earth burned across the sky like a second sunrise. From the surface, people looked up and saw streaks of light flashing between the stars. Explosions bloomed in silent brilliance, visible even through the atmosphere. The children of Earth watched the heavens and knew that their future was being decided in the void above. In the heart of the battle, Captain commanded the destroyer EAS Retribution, with the cold focus of a surgeon cutting away disease. Her ship darted through the chaos, striking at vessels and dancing away before they could respond. She was 43 years old, born in the underground city beneath Mount. She had never seen the sun until she was 20, when she had been brought to the surface for her final training exercise. That moment, stepping into the daylight and feeling warmth on her face for the first time, had changed her forever. She had sworn then that her children would not have to live in hiding, that they would walk under open skies without fear. Now she fought to make that oath come true. Targeting data locked, her weapons officer reported. Enemy cruiser dead ahead. Studied her displays. The cruiser was 3 times the size of her destroyer, with shields that should have been able to absorb anything she could throw at it. But the Retribution carried weapons that the enemy had never seen before. Fire, she ordered. The destroyer launched a spread of missiles, not at the cruiser's shields, but at a specific point on its hull. The missiles had been designed by human engineers who had spent decades studying captured technology. They knew exactly where the power conduits connected to the shield generators. They knew exactly how to hit. The missiles struck home. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the cruiser's shields flickered and died, leaving the massive ship exposed. "Shields down," the weapons officer announced. "They are trying to restore power." "They will not have time," directed her ship in a tight arc around the crippled cruiser. "Target their engines. All weapons fire." The Retribution poured plasma fire into the cruiser's exposed hull. Secondary explosions rippled across the enemy vessel as ammunition stores and fuel lines ignited. Within seconds, the mighty cruiser was a drifting hulk. "Target destroyed," the weapons officer said. There was fierce pride in his voice, but had no time to celebrate. Her displays showed dozens of other battles raging around her. Human ships were holding their own against the fleet, but they were taking losses. Every destroyed human vessel represented years of secret work, thousands of hours of training, crew members who had given their lives for this moment. The cost of freedom was being paid in blood. "Captain," her sensor officer called out, "I am detecting a priority signal from the flagship. It is Supreme Commander." Raised an eyebrow, put it on speakers. The voice that filled the bridge was distorted by static and interference, but the rage in it was clear. "All human vessels, this is Supreme Commander of the Dominion. You have committed an act of war against the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. Surrender now, and some of you may be spared. Continue fighting, and I will personally ensure that every human being is hunted to extinction." Listened to the threat and felt nothing but contempt. She had grown up on stories of cruelty. She had seen recordings of the surrender ceremony, where human leaders had been forced to kneel before their conquerors. She had lost family members in the resistance, an uncle caught and executed, a cousin who had died in a mining accident while secretly building ships. She pressed the button to respond. "Supreme Commander," she said calmly, "this is Captain of the Earth Alliance ship Retribution. On behalf of humanity, I have a message for you." She paused for a moment, making sure he was listening. "We do not surrender, we do not kneel, and we do not fear extinction because we know something you do not." "And what is that, human?" His voice was mocking. "We know how to wait," smiled grimly. "We waited 30 years for this day. We will wait 30 more if we have to. However long it takes, whatever the cost, we will be free. You cannot break us because we have already endured the worst you can do. Now it is your turn to suffer." She cut the transmission. Around her, the bridge crew stared at her with expressions ranging from shock to admiration. Her first officer, a young man named, let out a low whistle. "Captain," he said, "that was either the bravest or the craziest thing I have ever heard." "Maybe both," returned her attention to the battle. "Now, let us give our Supreme Commander something to really worry about. Helm, take us toward the flagship." On Dominion's wrath, listened to the human captain's defiance with growing fury. No one spoke to him that way. No one challenged him and lived. "Find that ship," he snarled. "I want it destroyed." "Supreme Commander, we are surrounded," reported. His voice was steady, but fear showed in his eyes. "The human reserve fleet has cut off our retreat. We are taking heavy casualties." Looked at his tactical display and saw the truth. His 500 ships were caught between the human main force and the 1,000 fresh vessels that had appeared from nowhere. His fleet was being systematically destroyed. He had underestimated them. He had dismissed them as primitives, as animals, and now he was paying the price for his arrogance. But he was still conqueror of 100 worlds. He would not die running. "All ships concentrate fire on the nearest human formation," he commanded. "If we are to fall today, we will take as many of them with us as possible." The fleet around its commander, damaged ships formed up with their stronger companions. Weapons systems that had been operating at reduced power were pushed to their limits. The Dominion would fight to the last. It would not be enough. Admiral watched the destruction of the Harvest fleet from the damaged bridge of Dominion's Pride. His station had been battered in the initial attack, but it was still functional enough to observe the battle. He felt no satisfaction in being right. He had warned not to engage. He had told the Supreme Commander that the human formation was a trap, but had been too proud, too certain of his own superiority. Now his fleet was dying. Admiral said quietly, "What do we do?" Considered the question. His station's weapons were mostly destroyed. His shields were barely functional. He had perhaps a dozen operational ships under his direct command, not enough to affect the battle in any meaningful way. He could try to flee. Some of his ships might escape through the human lines. He could report to the High Council, tell them what had happened, warn them about the threat that humanity represented. But even as he considered it, he knew it would be pointless. The humans had clearly been preparing for this for decades. If they had hidden one fleet, they might have hidden more. If they could build shadow gates that opened in multiple places at once, they could strike anywhere. The Dominion was facing something it had never encountered before, a species that refused to be conquered, no matter the odds. "We wait," said finally. "We observe, and we pray that the High Council takes this threat seriously." Across the void, his flagship exploded under concentrated human fire. The Supreme Commander's final transmission was a wordless scream of rage. Captain had led the assault on Dominion's wrath. Her destroyer had been one of a dozen human ships that had converged on the flagship. They had worked together with perfect coordination, each ship targeting a different system, each attack weakening the massive vessel's defenses. But the flagship was powerful. Even surrounded and outmaneuvered, it had fought back with terrible fury. Its weapons had destroyed 5 human ships before the end. The retribution was the 6th. Had known the ship was crippled the moment the plasma bolt struck her engine room. The explosion had torn through 3 decks, killing a dozen crew members instantly. Her ship was falling toward the planet, pulled by Earth's gravity. "Damage report," she ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "Engines destroyed," reported. "Life support failing. We are venting atmosphere on decks 3 through 5. Weapons. Forward plasma cannons are still operational. Missile bays are empty." Looked at her displays. The Dominion's wrath was directly ahead of them, also damaged, also drifting. The flagship was trying to bring its remaining weapons to bear on the human ships around it. She could see the bridge section clearly. That was where would be standing, issuing orders, trying to rally his crew. She said quietly, "Get everyone to the escape pods." Her first officer stared at her. "Captain." "The ship is dying. There is nothing more we can do here." She turned to face him. "But there is one more thing I can do." "Understood." His face went pale. "Captain, no, there has to be another way." "There is not." put her hand on his shoulder. "I am not ordering you to die with me. Get the crew out. Tell their families that they fought well. The families will want to know about you too." Smiled. It was a sad expression, but there was peace in it. "Tell them I finally got to see the sun. Tell them it was worth everything." She pushed him toward the exit. "Now go, that is an order." Hesitated for one more moment. Then he saluted, turned, and ran for the escape pods. Behind him, the bridge crew followed, casting final glances at their captain as they left. Watched them go. When the bridge was empty, she turned back to her controls. The Retribution was still drifting toward Dominion's wrath. All she had to do was point the bow in the right direction. She thought about her parents who had died building the fleet. She thought about her children, safe in the underground cities, watching the battle on their screens. She thought about all the generations that would come after, the humans who would live in freedom because of what was happening today. Then she pushed the emergency thruster controls to maximum. The Retribution surged forward, its damaged engines screaming in protest. Alarms blared warnings that ignored. She aimed her dying ship directly at the bridge of Dominion's wrath. Saw her coming. He had time to understand what was happening. He had time to scream one final order. He did not have time to stop her. The EAS Retribution struck Dominion's wrath at full speed. The collision tore through the flagship's weakened hull, ripping through deck after deck, until both ships were joined in a single mass of twisted metal. Secondary explosions finished what the impact had started. The combined wreckage of the two vessels broke apart, scattering debris across 100 kilometers of space. Supreme Commander, Conqueror of 100 worlds, died in the flames. Captain, Daughter of the Resistance, died with him. And across the human fleet, ship after ship began broadcasting the same signal, a recording of final transmission, her words echoing through the void. "We do not surrender, we do not kneel, and we do not fear extinction." General Cole stood in the broadcast center of Citadel Zero, facing a camera that would send his image across the galaxy. The Battle of Earth was nearly over. The Harvest Fleet had been destroyed. Admiral had surrendered his station. Human ships now controlled the space around there for the first time in 30 years. But the war was far from finished. The Dominion had thousands more ships, hundreds of conquered worlds, countless soldiers ready to fight. This victory was just the beginning. That was why this broadcast was so important. "Are we ready?" asked. The communications officer nodded. "We are broadcasting on all frequencies, General. Every ship, every station, every planet with a receiver will hear this, including the Dominion." Straightened his uniform. He thought about all the species that had been conquered by they with their 6 arms, the crystalline, the aquatic, and countless others. They had all been told that resistance was futile, that the Dominion was invincible. Today, humanity would show them otherwise. "Begin transmission," he said. The camera light turned red, looked directly into the lens and spoke. "This message goes out to all beings in the galaxy, and conquered alike. My name is General Cole of the Earth Alliance. 30 years ago, the Dominion invaded our world. They destroyed our armies. They killed our people. They demanded our submission. And we gave it to them. We bowed. We served. We called them master. But we did not surrender. We never surrendered. For 30 years, we built in secret. We trained in hiding. We waited for the moment when we could strike back. Today, that moment has come. The Harvest Fleet has been destroyed. Supreme Commander is dead. Earth is free. To the Dominion, I say this. Your empire is built on fear. You conquer because you believe others are weaker than you. But humanity has proven that strength is not about size or technology. It is about will. It is about sacrifice. It is about refusing to accept defeat, no matter how long the struggle takes. We are coming for you, not to conquer, we are not like you, but to end your tyranny, to free every world you have enslaved, to show the galaxy that no one has to live in fear. And to every species living under rule I say this: you are not alone. Rise up, fight back. We will stand with you. Earth does not kneel, and from this day forward neither should anyone else. The transmission ended, let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Stood in the doorway watching him. That was a good speech, she said. It was the truth. Turned to face her. What happens now? Now we see if they believe us. Walked to the main display, where status reports were flooding in from across the galaxy. Our shadow gates have opened at 10 other locations. Fleet elements are engaging forces at their main supply depot in the system. We are also receiving transmissions from resistance cells on multiple conquered worlds. They are rising up. Some of them, not all, many are still too afraid, still too beaten down. But give them time, smiled grimly. Once they see that the Dominion can be hurt, can be defeated, more will join us. Looked at the display. Red markers showed positions. Green markers showed human forces. And scattered among them, yellow markers appeared, signals from alien resistance groups that were responding to his broadcast. The galaxy was beginning to wake up. On Dominion's pride, listened to General Cole's message with a complicated mix of emotions. She had been captured when the station surrendered. Human soldiers had taken her to a holding cell with others surviving, where they waited to learn their fate. Many of her fellow prisoners expected to be executed. The Dominion would have done the same to human prisoners. It was the natural order of war. The victor destroyed the defeated. But the humans had not killed anyone. They had provided medical care to the wounded. They had given food and water to the prisoners. They had treated them with more dignity than the Dominion had ever shown its conquered subjects. Did not understand. The door to her cell opened. A human soldier, female, young, with dark skin and bright eyes, gestured for her to follow. "Where are you taking me?" asked. "The director wants to speak with you," the soldier replied. There was no cruelty in her voice, only professional distance. Was led through the corridors of the station, past damaged sections and busy repair crews. Everywhere she looked, humans were working to restore systems, treat the wounded, and secure the vessel. They moved with purpose and efficiency. These were not the broken slaves she had been told about. These were warriors. Finally, she was brought to a large room that had once been Admiral's personal quarters. Now it served as a temporary command center. A human woman sat behind the desk, studying data displays. She looked up when entered. The woman said, "I am director, please sit." Hesitated, then took the offered chair. She studied the human before her, gray hair, weathered face, eyes that had seen too much. This was the leader of the human resistance. This was the person who had orchestrated the greatest military deception in galactic history. "You are wondering why you are here," said. It was not a question. "I am wondering why I am alive," replied. "The Dominion would have executed me." "Yes, your people are fond of executions." His voice was cold. "We are not." "Why? After what the Dominion has done to your people, you would have every right to take revenge." Was silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "I have spent 30 years planning this war. Every day I thought about the who killed my friends, enslaved my people, treated us like animals. There were times when all I wanted was to see your entire species burn." She leaned forward. "But that is not who I want humanity to be. We are fighting for freedom, not for vengeance. And freedom means nothing if we become the same as our oppressors." Thought about this. It was a strange concept, mercy in the middle of war. The Dominion had always taught that mercy was weakness, that conquered people should be crushed until they could never rise again. And yet humanity had risen anyway. They had risen precisely because the Dominion had never shown them mercy, never given them a reason to accept their fate. Perhaps the humans understood something that the Dominion did not. "You noticed us," continued. 2 years ago, you started investigating the missing population numbers. You saw things that no other saw. Do you know why? Shook her head. Because you looked at us as people. His gaze was intense. Everyone else saw animals, resources, servants, but you asked questions. You paid attention. You treated us like a species worthy of study, not cattle worthy only of slaughter. That is why I am alive, Sid. Understanding dawned. Yes, you saw our humanity when your own people refused to. That makes you valuable, stood. The Dominion is going to fall, not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. When it does, someone will need to build something better in its place. Someone who can see all species as worthy of respect. You want me to help you? I want you to think about it, gestured to the door. You will be treated well. When you have made your decision, let my people know. Rose slowly. At the door she paused and looked back. Director, that captain who destroyed ship, she knew she would die. Why did she do it? His expression shifted. Grief flickered across her features before she controlled it. Because she believed in something larger than herself, said quietly. Because she knew that her sacrifice would give others a chance to live in freedom. Because that is what humans do. We give everything for the people we love. Nodded slowly. She thought she was beginning to understand these strange, impossible creatures who had fooled an empire and changed the galaxy forever. She walked out of the room, the soldier guiding her back to her cell. Behind her, returned to her displays, planning the next phase of a war that would reshape civilization itself. The Shadow Gate had awakened, Earth's fleet had emerged, and across the galaxy the fires of rebellion were beginning to burn. 6 months after the Battle of Earth, the galaxy was on fire. General Cole stood in the war room of the newly established Earth Alliance Command Center, studying the holographic map that filled the center of the room. Red markers showed controlled systems. Green markers showed worlds that had joined the Alliance. And yellow markers, there were so many yellow markers now, showed systems in rebellion. The collective has officially declared independence, reported Captain Sarah Hayes, his chief intelligence officer. Their crystalline fleets are engaging Dominion forces in the shimmering expanse. They want to coordinate with our forces in the sector. Nodded. They were a race of silicon-based beings who had been conquered 3 centuries ago. For generations, they had served the Dominion without protest. Now they were fighting with a ferocity that surprised even their masters. What about he asked. Still hesitant. Their council is debating whether to join the rebellion openly. They have sent supplies and intelligence, but they are afraid of Dominion retaliation against their. Understandable. Thought about the aquatic beings who lived in vast underwater cities. Their world was vulnerable to orbital bombardment. One determined fleet could turn their oceans into steam. But he also knew that fear could only hold people for so long. They had watched the Battle of Earth. They had heard his broadcast. They knew that the Dominion was not invincible. Eventually, they would have to choose. Continue to support them quietly, ordered. When they are ready to stand with us openly, we will be there. He turned his attention back to the map. The war was spreading faster than even had predicted. Human fleets had struck at 12 Dominion positions in the first week alone, using the Shadow Gate technology to appear without warning and disappear before the enemy could mount an effective response. They were struggling to adapt. Their military doctrine was built around massive fleet actions, overwhelming force brought to bear against a single target. They did not know how to fight an enemy that could be everywhere and nowhere at once. But they were learning, and they were angry. On the Eve Prime, the High Council met in emergency session. The council chamber was a vast dome of black stone, lit by hovering orbs of cold blue light. 12 sat in a semicircle, each one representing a major sector of the Dominion. At their center, on a throne carved from the bones of conquered kings, sat the High Sovereign himself, Lord, ruler of the Dominion for the past 500 years. He was ancient, even by standards. His gray skin had faded to nearly white. His 4 eyes were dim with age. But his mind was still sharp and his anger burned hot. "Explain to me," he said, his voice like grinding stone, "how a species we conquered 30 years ago has managed to destroy 2 of our fleets, spark rebellions across the empire, and make the Dominion look like fools." The council members shifted uncomfortably. None of them wanted to be the one to answer. Finally, High Admiral rose. She was the supreme commander of the Dominion military, responsible for the security of the entire empire. The failures of the past 6 months fell squarely on her shoulders. "High Sovereign," she said carefully, "the humans were underestimated. Their surrender was a deception. They spent 30 years building a hidden fleet and developing technology that, in some ways, surpasses our own." "Surpasses our own," Lord's eyes narrowed. "How is that possible?" "They captured technology during the initial invasion. Then they spent decades studying it, reverse engineering it, and improving upon it." Pulled up a holographic display. "Their Shadow Gate technology is particularly dangerous. It allows them to open wormholes to any point within 50 light-years of Earth. They can strike anywhere, anytime, and we cannot predict where they will appear. Then find their Shadow Gates and destroy them." "We have tried, High Sovereign, but the gates are hidden deep beneath Earth's surface, protected by shields that we cannot penetrate. A direct assault on Earth would require our entire remaining fleet, and even then, success is not guaranteed." Lord was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was cold. "I have ruled the Dominion for 500 years. In that time, I have crushed 1,000 rebellions. I have destroyed species that dared to challenge our authority. I have built an empire that spans the galaxy." He stood, and despite his age, there was still power in his presence. "I will not let it be threatened by insects. High Admiral, you will take the Grand Fleet to Earth. You will destroy their Shadow Gates, burn their cities, and execute every human who has ever held a weapon against us. The galaxy will learn that defying the Dominion means extinction." Hesitated. "High Sovereign, the Grand Fleet is our last reserve. If we deploy it and fail—" "We will not fail." Lord's eyes blazed with fury. "The humans believe they have won because they surprised us, but surprise only works once. Now we know what they are capable of. Now we will crush them as they should have been crushed 30 years ago." He turned to the council. "Mobilize everything. Strip the garrisons from every conquered world if you must. I want the largest fleet in Dominion history assembled within 1 month. We will end this rebellion at its source." The council members bowed their heads in acknowledgement. Within hours, orders were going out across the empire. The Dominion was preparing its final solution for the human problem. Director received the intelligence report in her office at Citadel Zero. She read it twice, making sure she understood what she was seeing. Then she called and the other senior commanders to an emergency meeting. "The Dominion is mobilizing," she told them. "Every ship they have, every garrison they can spare. High Admiral is leading them personally. They will be at Earth in approximately 6 weeks. Study the numbers on the display. How many ships?" "Our best estimate is 8,000. The room went silent. 8,000 warships. The Earth Alliance had less than 4,000, even counting their new allies from the other rebel species. "They are betting everything on one attack," said slowly. "Yes, and if they win, it is over. Not just for us, for every rebel movement in the galaxy. The Dominion will make an example of Earth that no one will ever forget." Colonel, commander of the Alliance ground forces, spoke up. "Can we evacuate? Use the Shadow Gates to move our people somewhere safe?" Shook her head. "The Shadow Gates require massive power generators that are built into Earth itself. We cannot move them. And even if we could, where would we go? Earth is not just our home, it is a symbol. If we abandon it, we tell the galaxy that the Dominion can still win. Then we stand and fight, said. We stand and fight, confirmed. But not alone. She brought up the galactic map. The Dominion is stripping garrisons from conquered worlds to build their fleet. That means those worlds are vulnerable. While brings her armada to Earth, we will send messages to every rebel cell, every resistance movement, every species that has ever dreamed of freedom. You want them to attack while the Dominion fleet is away, realized. Exactly. The Dominion thinks they can end this war by destroying Earth. But we are not the war, we are just the spark. The fire has already spread. Even if we fall, the rebellion will continue. She looked around the room at the faces of her commanders. These were people who had devoted their lives to this cause. Many of them had been born in the underground, never knowing a world without oppression. There is something else, she said quietly. The Dominion Grand Fleet will be the largest concentration of military power in history. If we can defeat it, if we can break it, then we will not just win a battle, we will break the Dominion itself. They will never recover. Leaned forward. How do we defeat 8,000 ships with 4,000? Smiled. It was a thin, dangerous expression. We cheat. Over the next 6 weeks, the Earth Alliance prepared for the battle that would decide the fate of the galaxy. Human engineers worked around the clock to build more shadow gates, hidden throughout the solar system. Each gate required enormous power and precise calibration, but the engineers had spent 30 years perfecting the technology. They knew exactly what they were doing. Meanwhile, messages went out across the galaxy. Communications officers contacted every rebel group, every resistance cell, every species that had shown sympathy for the Alliance cause. The message was simple: when the Dominion fleet attacks Earth, strike everywhere else. The response exceeded expectations. A six-armed species that had been enslaved for their exceptional manual dexterity reported that their workers were prepared to sabotage Dominion factories. A race of telepaths who had been forced to serve as interrogators promised to scramble communications at the critical moment. Even the cautious finally committed their hidden fleet to the cause. We have confirmation from 37 rebel groups, Captain Hayes reported. They will all launch coordinated attacks the moment the Grand Fleet engages our forces. The Dominion will be fighting on dozens of fronts simultaneously. Nodded, but he was still worried. 37 rebel groups could cause chaos, but chaos alone would not defeat 8,000 warships. Earth needed a decisive advantage, something that would tip the balance. Had promised she had a plan. She had spent the last 6 weeks working on something in secret, refusing to share details with anyone. Trust me, she had said. When the time comes, you will understand. Did trust her. She had spent 30 years planning the liberation of Earth. If anyone could find a way to defeat the Dominion Grand Fleet, it was her. But as the days counted down, he could not help feeling that the fate of humanity hung by a thread. High Admiral stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Dominion's glory, and watched her fleet assemble in the staging area. 8,000 warships, the mightiest force ever gathered under a single command. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, carriers, every type of vessel the Dominion could field. The ships stretched across space like a wall of steel and fire. This was the instrument of humanity's destruction. The fleet is assembled, High Admiral, her second-in-command reported. All ships report ready for deployment. Allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She had been given an impossible task: crush a rebellion that had humiliated the Dominion for 6 months. Now she had the tools to accomplish it. The humans had fought well. She could admit that now, in the privacy of her own thoughts. They had used their cunning and their technology to achieve victories that should have been impossible. They had inspired other species to rise against rule. But cunning could not defeat overwhelming force. Technology could not stop 8,000 ships. And inspiration meant nothing when the inspirers were dead. Set course for Earth, commanded. Fleet Formation Alpha 1, we will arrive in 5 days. The Grand Fleet began to move, engines flaring across the darkness of space. They would travel to Earth at maximum speed, giving the humans no time to prepare additional defenses. Expected the battle to be brutal. The humans would fight hard, they had proven that much. But in the end, numbers would tell. She would lose ships, perhaps many ships, but she would win. And when it was over, she would personally watch as Earth burned. She thought of the human captain who had rammed her ship into his flagship. Such dedication, such willingness to sacrifice. It was almost admirable. But admiration did not mean mercy. The humans had killed Dominion soldiers, destroyed Dominion ships, challenged Dominion authority. For that, they would pay the ultimate price. The Grand Fleet arrived in the Sol system 5 days later. Had expected to find human ships waiting for her. She had expected a desperate defensive formation, humans prepared to fight to the last against overwhelming odds. What she found instead was emptiness. "High Admiral," her sensor officer reported, confusion evident in his voice. "I am not detecting any significant enemy presence. A few patrol craft near the planet, but no defensive fleet." Frown, this made no sense. The humans had 4,000 ships according to intelligence estimates. Where were they? "It must be a trap," she said. "They are hiding somewhere, waiting to spring an ambush. Continue forward but maintain defensive formation. All ships at full alert." The Grand Fleet crept toward Earth, sensors straining to detect any sign of the hidden enemy. But as minutes passed and then hours, nothing appeared. The human patrol craft retreated toward the planet, but no reinforcements emerged to join them. Finally, the Grand Fleet reached orbit. Below them, Earth turned slowly, its blue oceans and green continents glowing in the light of the sun. It was beautiful, thought. A pity it would have to be destroyed. "Launch bombardment ships," she ordered. "Target their major population centers and military installations. Begin with." "High Admiral," her sensor officer's voice was suddenly sharp with alarm. Energy signatures, multiple energy signatures appearing throughout the system. Spun to look at her tactical display. What she saw made her blood freeze. Space was tearing open. Not in one place or 12 places, but in hundreds. Wormholes bloomed throughout the Sol system like flowers in a garden. They appeared behind the Grand Fleet, in front of it, above and below, and on every side. And from each wormhole came ships. Human ships, 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 ships. Vessels from a dozen species, all bearing the marks of the rebellion. They poured into normal space in an endless stream, surrounding the Grand Fleet in a sphere of enemies. "How many?" demanded, her voice steady despite the terror rising in her chest. "Sensors are still counting, High Admiral." The officer's voice cracked. "At least 12,000, possibly more." 12,000 ships. The humans had not been building just one fleet in secret. They had been building dozens, hidden across the galaxy, waiting for this moment. And they had used the Grand Fleet's single-minded focus on Earth to gather every rebel ship in the galaxy to one place. While it had been racing to destroy the humans had been preparing to destroy her. "We have an incoming transmission," the communications officer reported. "It is Director." His face appeared on the main screen. She looked tired, thought, tired but fierce. "High Admiral said, 'Welcome to Earth. I believe you have met some of my friends.'" Found her voice. "This changes nothing. Even with 12,000 ships, you cannot defeat the Grand Fleet. Our vessels are larger, more powerful." "Perhaps," interrupted, "but we are not here to match your firepower. We are here to show the galaxy that the Dominion can be surrounded, can be trapped, can be made to fear." She leaned forward. "For 500 years, the Dominion has conquered and enslaved. You told every species in the galaxy that resistance was futile, that no one could stand against you. Today, we prove that was a lie." "We will destroy you," said, "even if it costs us every ship in the fleet." You could try, his expression did not change, or you could surrender, end this war here and now, accept that the Dominion's time is over. The Dominion will never surrender to animals. Nodded slowly. I thought you would say that very well. She turned to someone off-screen. General Cole, begin Operation Unity. Around the Grand Fleet, 12,000 ships opened fire. The Battle of Saul was the largest space engagement in galactic history. 8,000 warships fought against a coalition of 12,000 vessels from a dozen species. The crossfire turned space into a nightmare of plasma bolts, missiles, and exploding ships. Commanded her fleet with skill born of centuries of experience. She formed her ships into defensive spheres, rotating formations that allowed damaged vessels to retreat while fresh ones took their place. She targeted enemy command ships, trying to break the coordination of the rebel forces. But the rebels had learned from their long years under rule. They knew Dominion tactics because they had been forced to serve the Dominion. They anticipated every move, countered every strategy. More importantly, they had something that had never faced: unity. The fought alongside the coordinated with the. Humans served on ships crewed by aliens, and aliens served on human vessels. They fought as one people, united by a common cause. 3 hours into the battle, the Grand Fleet had lost 2,000 ships. The rebels had lost 3,000. But for every rebel vessel destroyed, it seemed that 2 more emerged from the wormholes. High Admiral, the sensor officer reported, we are detecting power failures across the Dominion network. Our communications with Prime have been severed. Multiple garrison worlds are reporting attacks. The coordinated strikes. While the Grand Fleet fought at Earth, rebel forces across the galaxy were rising. The Dominion was burning from within. Looked at her tactical display and saw the truth. Even if she won this battle, she could not win the war. The rebellion was too widespread. The hatred of rule ran too deep. She had one chance. All ships concentrate fire on the human flagship, she ordered. Target Director directly. If we kill her, we might break their morale. The Grand Fleet reformed around its surviving battleships and drove toward the center of the rebel formation. Weapons blazed, cutting through the smaller vessels that tried to block them. They were getting closer to the human command ship, if they could just. A new fleet emerged from a wormhole directly in front of them. 1,000 ships bearing the emblem of the species that had hesitated so long to join the fight. They had been holding back, waiting for the perfect moment. Now they threw themselves into the path of the advance. The collision shattered the Grand Fleet's formation. In the chaos, rebel ships swarmed the vessels, targeting engines and weapon systems with precision strikes. The battle that had been close became a rout. High Admiral stood on the bridge of the Dominion's glory and watched her fleet die around her. She thought of Lord, sitting on his throne of bones, waiting for news of victory. He would not receive it. She thought of the humans, those impossible creatures who had hidden their strength for 30 years and emerged to challenge an empire. She thought of her own career, her centuries of conquest, and wondered if any of it had meant anything. High Admiral, her communications officer said quietly, the rebels are offering terms. They want us to surrender. Closed her eyes. She had been fighting her entire life. She had conquered worlds and destroyed fleets. She had served the Dominion with absolute loyalty. But loyalty to what? An empire that enslaved billions, a system that crushed every species it encountered. She opened her eyes and looked at her crew. They were watching her, waiting for orders. They would fight to the death if she commanded it. They would die for the Dominion because they knew nothing else. But there had to be something else. There had to be a better way. Transmit our surrender, said quietly. All ships stand down. Around her the bridge crew stared in shock. Then slowly they began to follow her orders. The Battle of Saul was over. The Dominion had fallen. The guns fell silent over Earth, and for the first time in 30 years, humanity looked at the stars without fear. Director stood at the window of her office in the newly constructed Alliance headquarters in Geneva. The city had been rebuilt in the months since the Battle of Saul, its ancient streets and modern towers rising from the ashes of occupation. Outside, people walked freely under open skies, something that millions of humans had never experienced. Was 70 years old now. The war had aged her beyond her years. Her hair had gone completely white, and lines of exhaustion marked her face. But her eyes still held the same fire that had burned through 30 years of planning and 6 months of war. Director Cole appeared in the doorway. He had been promoted to Supreme Commander of Alliance military forces, though he insisted on still being called General. The delegation has arrived. Nodded and straightened her jacket. Let us go make peace. The signing ceremony was held in the Great Hall of the Alliance Council building, a magnificent structure that had been built to represent the new order. Its walls were decorated with symbols from every species that had joined the Alliance: human stars, crystals, waves, tools, and dozens more. Above the main entrance, carved in stone, were the words that had become the Alliance motto: "We do not kneel." Representatives from every member species filled the hall. They had come from across the galaxy, traveling through shadow gates that had once been weapons of war and were now bridges of peace. The atmosphere was charged with emotion, joy, grief, hope, and lingering fear all mixed together. At one end of the hall, a table had been set up for the signing. Took her seat at the center, flanked by representatives of the major Alliance species. Across from her sat the delegation, led by High Admiral. The High Admiral had been granted provisional immunity in exchange for her surrender. She had spent the past 6 months helping to negotiate the peace terms, working to minimize the bloodshed that followed the Dominion's collapse. She had earned the grudging respect of many Alliance leaders, though not everyone was willing to forgive. Studied her former enemy, looked diminished somehow, smaller than she had seemed during the war. The weight of defeat showed in every line of her body. But there was something else there too, something that might have been relief. "High Admiral," said formally, "you have reviewed the terms of the treaty." "I have." His voice was quiet but steady. "And you accept them on behalf of the remaining government?" The question was largely ceremonial. The High Council had collapsed within weeks of the Battle of Saul. Lord had died when rebels stormed his palace on Prime. The survivors had scattered, some fleeing to remote sectors, others surrendering to Alliance forces. The Dominion that had terrorized the galaxy for 500 years was gone. What remained was a broken species trying to find its place in a new order. "I accept them," said, "on behalf of all who wish to live in peace." Nodded, "Then let us proceed." The treaty document was massive, containing hundreds of pages that detailed everything from territorial boundaries to war reparations to the rights of former conquered species. Had insisted on one crucial element: they would not be punished collectively. Individual war criminals would face justice, but the species as a whole would be given the chance to join the Alliance as equals. Many had opposed this. They had wanted Prime destroyed, turned to glass from orbit. They had demanded that all be enslaved for 100 years to learn what their victims had suffered. Even some humans had argued for harsher terms. Had refused them all. "We did not fight this war to become conquerors," she had said in the council debates. "We fought to end an empire built on fear and oppression. If we build our peace on those same foundations, then we have learned nothing." Now she picked up the ceremonial pen and signed her name to the Treaty of Saul. One by one, the other Alliance representatives followed. Finally, added her signature, formally ending the Dominion and establishing the Saul Alliance as the new galactic government. The hall erupted in cheers. Humans embraced, touched hands with. Creatures who had been slaves for generations celebrated with those who had helped free them. watched the celebration with a mixture of pride and sadness. So many had died to reach this moment. So many would never see the peace they had fought for. She thought of Captain, who had rammed her ship into his flagship. She thought of the millions who had lived and died in the underground cities, never seeing the sun. She thought of all the sacrifices, all the years of waiting, all the quiet courage that had made this day possible. "Director," a soft voice interrupted her thoughts. Turned to find standing beside her. The young had changed much over the past year. She had become a bridge between species, helping to negotiate understanding between former enemies. Had come to rely on her judgment and her unique perspective. Ambassador said. They had given her that title 3 months ago, making her the first to hold official rank in the Alliance government. "What brings you here?" "I wanted to watch the signing." Looked around the hall at the celebrating crowds. "I never thought I would see something like this. And humans working together, building something new." "Neither did I once." His voice was soft. "For many years all I wanted was to see the Dominion destroyed. I dreamed of cities burning, people suffering the way my people had suffered." She turned to face directly. "But hatred is exhausting. It eats away at you from the inside. I realized that if I let it consume me, I would become exactly what I was fighting against." "So you chose mercy." "I chose hope," smiled slightly. "Hope that we could be better than our enemies. Hope that the galaxy could change. Hope that species who had every reason to hate each other might learn to live together." Was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question that had been on her mind since her capture. "Do you trust me, Director? Do you trust any?" Considered the question seriously. "Trust is not given, it is earned. You have earned mine through your actions and your choices. As for other," she shrugged, "some will earn trust, some will not. That is true of any species." "Including humans." "Especially humans," laughed softly. "We are capable of great things and terrible things, often at the same time. The same war that produced Captain's sacrifice also produced people who wanted to commit genocide against the virtue and cruelty live side by side in every species. What matters is which we choose to cultivate. And the Sol Alliance will cultivate virtue. We will try." His expression grew serious. "That is all anyone can do. Try to be better than those who came before. Try to leave the galaxy a little more just than we found it." She put her hand on shoulder. "You are part of that now, Ambassador. The choices you make will help shape what the Alliance becomes. Are you ready for that responsibility?" Met her eyes. "I think so, I hope so." "Then let us get to work. We have a galaxy to rebuild." 1 year after the signing of the Treaty of Sol, returned to the place where it had all begun. Citadel Zero had been decommissioned. The massive underground complex that had served as Resistance headquarters for 3 decades was being converted into a museum. Future generations would walk these halls and learn about the men and women who had built an army in secret, waiting for the day they could strike back. Walked slowly through the familiar corridors, remembering. Here was the command center where she had watched the Battle of Earth unfold. Here was the hangar where the first ships of the Prometheus array had been assembled. Here was the dormitory where young soldiers had slept before shipping out to the hidden fleet. So many ghosts. She came at last to a small room that had been her private office for 30 years. It was empty now, stripped of equipment and personal effects, just 4 bare walls and a desk. Sat down at the desk and closed her eyes. She thought about the young colonel who had stood at the surrender ceremony, watching her people kneel before alien conquerors. She thought about the day she had been recruited to the Resistance, the moment she had realized that surrender did not have to mean defeat. She thought about the weight of 3 decades of secrets, of planning, of waiting for a moment that might never come. And she thought about what came next. The Alliance was growing stronger every day. The Shadow Gate network was being expanded, connecting distant systems and allowing trade to flourish. Former conquered species were rebuilding their worlds and their cultures. Who had once been masters were learning to be partners. There were still problems, of course. Some sectors remained unstable. Pirates and warlords carved out territories in the chaos. Old hatreds flared into occasional violence. The work of building a just society was never finished. But the foundation was strong. The principles had fought for freedom, equality, cooperation, were taking root across the galaxy. A new generation was growing up without knowing the fear of dominion rule. Director opened her eyes, stood in the doorway looking concerned. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Just remembering." She rose slowly from the desk. "I spent so much of my life in this room, planning for a future I was not sure I would ever see. Now that it is here, I am not quite sure what to do with myself." Smiled. "The Alliance Council has some ideas about that. They want to give you a formal title, something like founder or architect of the Alliance." Shook her head. "I do not need titles. I never wanted power or glory. I just wanted my people to be free. And now they are." Stepped into the room. "Because of you, because of what you built here, the galaxy will remember you. Long after both of us are gone, people will tell stories about the woman who planned humanity's liberation." "Let them tell stories about all of us," said. "About the millions who lived in hiding, who sacrificed everything for a dream. About Captain and all the others who gave their lives. About the aliens who joined our cause and the who chose peace over pride." She gestured around the empty room. "This was never about one person. It was about all of us together." Nodded slowly. "Speaking of together, there is a ceremony this afternoon. The Memorial of Patience is being dedicated. They want you to speak." Sighed. "Another speech." "The last one, I promise." Grinned. "After that, you can retire to a quiet beach somewhere and let the young people handle things." "A quiet beach," laughed. "I am not sure I would know what to do with myself." But she followed him out of the room, leaving Citadel Zero behind for the last time. The Memorial of Patience stood on a hillside overlooking Geneva, a tower of white stone that rose toward the sky. Its walls were carved with names, millions of names, representing everyone who had contributed to the resistance. Underground workers, secret soldiers, scientists who had built the shadow gates, teachers who had trained generations in hidden schools. Every person who had kept the flame of hope alive during 30 years of darkness. At the base of the tower, a plaza had been built where people could gather. Today it was filled with thousands of beings from across the galaxy, humans, and even some. They had come to witness the dedication of the monument and to honor those who had made their freedom possible. Stood at a podium before the crowd. Behind her, the tower rose like a beacon. Before her, the faces of a new galaxy looked up with hope and gratitude. She had written a speech, but as she looked at the crowd, she set her notes aside. This moment deserved something more personal. 33 years ago, she began, I watched my world surrender to the Dominion. I stood at the back of a crowd of defeated soldiers and diplomats, and I made a promise to myself. I swore that one day humanity would rise again. She paused, looking at the names carved into the stone behind her. For 30 years, millions of people kept that promise. They worked in secret, building ships and weapons while pretending to be loyal slaves. They raised children in underground cities, teaching them the truth about who we were and what we were fighting for. They died in accidents and executions, never seeing the victory they had sacrificed everything to achieve. Her voice grew stronger. This memorial is for them, for the ones who waited, for the ones who believed even when belief seemed foolish, for the ones who passed the torch to the next generation, trusting that one day the flame would grow into a fire that could not be extinguished. She turned to gesture at the diverse crowd. But this memorial is not just about humans. It is about every species that suffered under Dominion rule, every worker who sabotaged a factory, every soldier who refused an order, every parent who whispered forbidden truths to their children. The Dominion thought they had crushed all resistance, but they were wrong. Hope cannot be conquered. It can only be hidden, waiting for the moment to emerge. Stepped forward, her eyes sweeping across the crowd. I am often asked why we showed mercy to why we did not take revenge for all the suffering they caused. Some people think it was weakness. Some think it was foolishness. She shook her head. It was neither. It was strength. The strength to break the cycle of hatred and violence. The strength to look at our enemies and see beings capable of change. The strength to build a future based on hope instead of fear. She pointed to a group near the front of the crowd. Human children playing with young and laughing together without any awareness of the history that separated their peoples. That is why we fought, not for revenge, not for power, but for them, for a generation that will grow up knowing that cooperation is better than conquest, that different species can work together as equals, that the galaxy can be more than a collection of empires and slaves. His voice softened. I am old now. I have lived to see things I never dared to dream of, but I know that my part in this story is nearly finished. The future belongs to others, to the young people who will carry the Alliance forward, who will face challenges we cannot imagine. She looked directly at the crowd. To them I say this: remember the patience of those who came before you. Remember that great things are not built in a day, but through years of small sacrifices and quiet courage. Remember that every choice you make, every act of kindness, every moment of compassion, every decision to choose hope over fear, adds to the foundation of the world you are building. She raised her hand toward the memorial. And remember the names on this tower. They were ordinary people who did extraordinary things. They did not fight because they wanted glory or power. They fought because they loved their children and wanted them to be free. Let their memory guide you. Let their sacrifice inspire you. Let their patience teach you that no matter how dark things seem, dawn always comes. Step back from the podium. For a long moment, silence held the crowd. Then someone began to clap. Then another and another. The applause built and built until it was a thunderous wave of sound, washing over the plaza and echoing off the memorial tower. Stood quietly, accepting the tribute not for herself, but for all the ghosts who surrounded her, the countless heroes who had given everything for this moment. As the applause faded, she looked up at the sky. It was a clear day, blue and bright. Ships moved among the stars, traveling freely through shadow gates that linked 100 worlds. Children laughed in the plaza below. Representatives of a dozen species talked and debated and worked together to build something new. Humanity had been underestimated. They had been conquered and enslaved and dismissed as animals. And they had risen. Not through hatred or vengeance, but through patience and hope. Through the belief that no matter how long the night lasted, morning would come. Through the certainty that freedom was worth any price, any sacrifice, any weight. Smiled, watching the future unfold before her. The Shadow Gate had awakened. Earth's hidden fleet had emerged, and the galaxy would never be the same. 10 years later, an old woman sat on a beach on the coast of what had once been Chile. The sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Was 80 years old. She had retired from public life 5 years ago, leaving the leadership of the Alliance to a new generation. Now she spent her days reading, walking on the beach, and occasionally receiving visitors who wanted to hear stories of the old days. A child ran past her, chasing a ball toward the waves. He had 6 arms, a young, one of thousands who now lived freely on Earth. His parents followed behind, calling for him to be careful near the water. Watched them with quiet contentment. This was what she had fought for. This was what all those years of planning and sacrifice had purchased. A galaxy where children of different species could play together without fear. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see approaching. The ambassador. No, she was a council member now, Looked older too, though she still moved with the grace of her people. Director said, using the old title out of habit, "I hope I am not disturbing you." Never gestured to the empty chair beside her. "Sit, watch the sunset, they are beautiful here." Sat for a long moment. They watched the sun sink toward the horizon in silence. "I have news," said eventually. "The council voted today to establish the first joint colony, humans, and working together to settle a new world. They are calling it New Hope." Smiled, "A good name. They want to name the main city after you, city. Tell them to name it after Captain instead. She deserves to be remembered." Nodded. She had expected that answer. They sat together as the sun disappeared below the waves, leaving the sky dark and studded with stars. Somewhere up there, ships were traveling through shadow gates, carrying people and goods between worlds that had once been enemies. "Do you ever regret it?" asked softly. "The choices you made, the years you spent hiding?" Considered the question. "I regret the suffering. I regret everyone we lost, but the choices," she shook her head. "No, we did what we had to do, and in the end we built something worth building." She looked up at the stars. "That is all anyone can hope for. To leave the universe a little better than they found it. To plant seeds for trees whose shade they will never enjoy." She smiled. "We planted seeds, and look at what has grown." Above them, the stars shone down on a galaxy at peace. A galaxy that had been transformed by the patience and courage of beings who had refused to accept defeat. Earth's hidden fleet had emerged from the shadows. The Shadow Gate had awakened. And humanity had shown the universe what they truly were. A species that could endure any hardship, wait any length of time, and sacrifice anything for the chance to be free. They had been underestimated once. They would never be underestimated again.